Canada's cry of enough is enough has been one of the most talked about topics in the Northern Hemisphere in recent days. The country is fed up with United States President Donald Trump's tariff moves, post-North American Free Trade Agreement trade pressures, and energy disputes. And now we move to a completely different dimension. Canada is preparing to suspend its $13 billion F-35 fighter jet deal. This has triggered a new round of tensions between Washington and Ottawa. But why is Canada taking such a huge decision? What does it mean to turn to Europe? Let's take a closer look at what is happening. Canada has long been cornered by the Trump administration's tough trade policies. Tariffs on steel and aluminum have hit the country's strongest exports. Then Trump's new outbursts sparked debates on everything from dairy to forest products. As if all this was not enough, now the United States-Canada defense cooperation is cracking. The Canadian Defense Ministry was planning to buy 88 F-35 Lightning II fighter jets from the United States. But the fate of this deal is now in doubt. Trump's refusal to back down on his tariff policies is crippling the F-35 project, Canadian officials say. The recently discussed question of whether to switch to European-made fighter jets is gaining seriousness. This means that Canada may follow a different path, even in transatlantic alliances. On March 10, 2025, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said in an official statement, "Our country's strategic interests will never be shaped by unilateral pressure or threats." These words, "We didn't ask for this fight. We didn't ask for this fight," were interpreted as a very harsh signal for those wondering about the future of the F-35 project. Although there was no direct reaction from the Washington administration after Carney's statement, some American sources started to circulate rumors that different sanctions may be on the agenda if Canada does not step back. Prime Minister Carney is known for his meticulous analysis of economic data as a former central bank governor. Although the cost of shelving a giant defense project like the F-35 would be high, there are signs that Carney is determined enough to take the risk. On March 12, 2025, in a meeting at the Canadian Defense Ministry building, which received limited press coverage, Carney reportedly agreed that withdrawal from the project is inevitable unless some guarantees are offered. Ottawa is considering possible alternatives to Lockheed Martin's $19 billion Canadian dollars, about $13.2 billion purchase of the fifth-generation jet fighter. Defense Minister Bill Blair said hours after being reappointed by new Prime Minister Mark Carney. Lockheed Martin said on Saturday that it valued its partnership with the Royal Canadian Air Force, but that questions about F-35 procurement were best handled by the United States and Canadian governments. However, Blair's remarks suggest that the first batch of F-35s could be accepted, but the rest of the fleet could be made up of European aircraft, such as the Swedish-built Saab Gripen. Flying a mixed fleet of fighter jets, on the other hand, has long been opposed by the Air Force, which would require two different training regimes, separate hangars and infrastructure, and a different supply chain, a much more costly prospect. Canada is actively exploring potential alternatives to the United States-built F-35 stealth fighter and will be in discussions with rival aircraft manufacturers, said Canadian Defense Minister Bill Blair. While this may seem like a weapons project, what lies underneath is the balance of power in North America and Canada's quest to protect its own interests. Defense partnerships are meaningful as long as they are based on mutual trust and respect, Carney said in his official statement dated March 10, 2025, implicitly criticizing the American side. Canada's resentment against the United States has been building, especially over the last few years, due to trade disputes, tariffs, and strategic moves. The outbreak of this accumulation over the F-35 project justifies experts who say tensions were inevitable. Some American news channels have commented that Canada's military capacity could suffer serious weakness without the F-35. However, some people close to the Ottawa administration said, "The resources we have poured into this project for years will not be wasted. We can move forward with European alternatives or domestic defense initiatives." The Carney government's failure to present a public strategy on this issue raises the question, is there a secret plan in the works. Concepts such as sovereignty and self-determination, which Prime Minister Carney frequently mentions in his statements, are read as signs that Canada has darkened its eyes this time. According to leaks from the Prime Minister's office, if the United States does not take the expected steps on tariffs and other economic restrictions, Ottawa is ready to talk not only about canceling the F-35, but also about moving independently from the United States in many areas. This is where the ongoing negotiations with Europe become important. On March 5, 2025, the Canadian Minister of Foreign Affairs issued an official statement saying that new cooperation opportunities are being discussed with our partners on the other side of the Atlantic. The talks, which are being held behind closed doors with some European defense companies and government representatives, involve next-generation aircraft and integrated defense systems, possibly as an alternative to the F-35. The extent of these contacts has not yet been made public, but it is clear that Canada wants to translate its anger at the United States into practical steps. Some American senators close to Trump have said that Canada's economic interests depend on the United States market. That's why Ottawa is being dragged into an unnecessary adventure. The Carney government's response was not delayed. On March 7, 2025, the Department of Defense issued a brief bulletin stating that Canada's economy is built on diversity and strong financial foundations. Sovereignty and independence trump commercial pressures. This response shows that Ottawa has no intention of backing down in the process leading up to the F-35 cancellation. Apart from the F-35 project, there is also talk of projects that Canada can carry out independently or with European partners in cybersecurity and artificial intelligence-based defense systems. On March 6, 2025, a report titled Risks of Foreign Dependence in Next-Generation Technologies was allegedly presented at a session held at the Ministry of Defense. One of the most talked about details in the lobbies is that the report includes the note, dependence on a single country may lead to strategic dilemmas in the long term. This shows that the Carney government, instead of appearing sympathetic to the United States, is preparing B and C plans in every field. Trump's America First policy has repeatedly irritated neighboring Canada, sometimes in agricultural products, sometimes in the energy sector, sometimes in automotive parts. The Ottawa administration has repeatedly expressed its reaction. We are the largest trading partner of the United States, but they treat us like a threat. Despite intensive negotiations between the parties in 2024 and early 2025, no agreement on tariffs was reached. In addition, Canada is uncomfortable with the changing national defense priorities of the United States. Everything had already piled up until the F-35 issue. The two so-called friends and allies are playing diplomatic chess, while Trump is pushing Ottawa by saying, I will withdraw the customs exemptions we have granted. Canada is showing the we will retaliate card, now threatening to cancel the F-35.